future is a concept. It doesn't exist. As the proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be, because time is always now.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds Podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about.
And other things.
Lambert, building biologist, a geobiologist, and operative alchemist. I'm excited to be able to talk with you tonight, or today, for you over there in France. Is that correct, in France?
Yeah, it's early morning for me.
Early morning, nice. So to kick it off, kind of want to touch a little bit on some alchemical subject matter, and then we can kind of get into like some geobiology and some other things. One thing I wanted to discuss with you in particular is the dry path. So maybe you can illuminate for myself and those listening the dry path, maybe speak to your experience with that and kind of your knowledge in this area.
Well, the dry path is, we can just compare it to the wet path, really. The wet path is using menstruums, and as we can imagine, a liquid environment to extract the principles. So you will get menstruums. I think are probably the most important subject in alchemy, because they are the mediums with which we actually start transferring from one realm to another, from the metallic realm to the mineral, and the mineral realm into the vegetable realm and into the human realm. Because if you're actually trying to produce any kind of consumable medicine, it needs to be brought through the realms, because you can't just take metal. You can't suck a nail. Well, you can actually. You will get iron if you suck a rusty nail, but the fact is that iron is not really compatible with the body. So things need to be brought through the realms. And there are two ways of doing that, using menstruums, which is like the wet path, or there is the dry path. And the dry path is, it's using basically dry menstrua, because you will get the, or mercury, let's say, liquid mercury is part of the dry path, but it's a dry menstruum,
Okay.
And so the dry path is using usually a lot higher temperatures, because to actually create these reactions in a dry way, we need a lot higher temperatures. So the dry path. Basically, we're using things like antimony and mercury.
I want to ask real quick, how many sorry, I just want to ask real quick, how many different menstruums are there?
I mean, there are loads of menstrua. I mean, put it this way, a menstruum is what? Is just a kind of solvent. When you make a cup of tea, you put hot water on your tea, and water is a menstruum, okay? And it has a certain power of extraction. But the water works in alchemy, another subject, because it's a path in itself.
Mm-hmm.
But the main menstruums in the vegetable realm that we use are, let's say, ethanol, which is the universal menstruum for the plant realm, because when you distill any plant, you will get an alcohol. Okay, then we have vinegar, which is used in the plant realm and also in the metallic realm and the mineral realm. Then there are more, probably what I would consider is the most understudied, underrated menstruum, and I think it is probably the most important menstruum, which I've been working on a lot recently, and a few of us in our community have been working on, that I'm trying to push forward as well, is the urine alkahest, Van Helmont's alkahest. I think urine is, because not a lot of people work it, because it absolutely stinks when you're putrefying your own urine and then distilling it, and it is just mind-blowing. It's extremely strong. It actually eats into the glass when it's properly prepared.
Now,
And
would there be a preference using animal urine versus human urine? And then would there be a specific diet that you would want to either have the animal consume or yourself consume in order to produce a better quality urine to use?
I think if you were going to do it really large scale, animal urine would be ideal. Because there's a lot of it. But the fact is, you can actually produce enough urine yourself. You go for a pee every morning, a few times a day. Normally, you would use the first mixture of the morning when after you've slept, and it's recommended use like a salt-free diet, probably not necessarily a totally vegetarian diet, but a low salt diet, vegetables, and you can drink wine, because wine is the noble spirit of alchemy. So drinking good quality wine, low salt diet, just some healthy living, and then you collect it and let it putrefy. And it is definitely an outside job.
That's fascinating. So, okay. So then I would assume that depending on, so you said the first in the morning, is that because that would contain more of certain properties within it that would kind of help that with the extraction process in some sense?
Yeah, it's because there's this culture of people actually drinking their own urine, treating themselves by drinking their own urine, which is extremely interesting, and it works. And the first urine in the morning, what people don't really understand is that when the reason we use urine is because it is purely philosophical. There's this balance in alchemy where a lot of people producing, let's say, product nowadays, they're using lab-grade chemistry, lab-grade products, and they're trying to churn out product. The fact is that philosophical menstrua, which we can talk about the philosophical wine spirit of Lully or Wiedenfeld. They say it's philosophical, and this is what makes the difference. So anything that's passed through a human body is automatically philosophical. So using the first urine of the morning, yes, because the body has been during sleep is recycling a lot of things. So the first urine of the morning is usually a lot clearer than a lot of other urines that you produce during the day, but it has a lot of the mineral, the excess mineral salts and stuff in, and it's these that we're actually looking for in the alkahest. And the fact is that also what a lot of people misconstrue is the idea of purity. Purity in alchemy, we need to purify everything, extreme purification before we actually remarry certain principles. And in fact, the most important thing are impurities, because the principle is that the menstruum is usually, we would say, the spirit. It's the spirit principle. It's not the sulfur principle. It's not the salt principle. It's the mercury. Okay, and the mercury acts as the vehicle. to take things from over the realms. But what actually creates these reactions are the impurities within that. And they create the bridge. And without the bridge, there is no transfer, or a very slow transfer, or a very limited transfer. Things like the crystal work that I've been doing quite recently, to actually extract at the end, after the preparation of all the crystals, is we use rectified alcohol over potassium carbonate, extremely dry and sharpened alcohol. And I tried it with some grain alcohol, and it didn't work. And then because I usually, if I can't get my grappa from Italy, because grappa, which is it's a wine spirit, it's a digestive wine spirit in Italy, which starts at 40%. You buy it in the bottle at 40%, and so it takes less distillations to actually rectify it. Start with the red wine as well; that works perfectly. And the fact is that it's the tiny volatiles that keep going through all these distillations, which are the let's say the impurities in that alcohol that create the bridge. And so I did it with rectified grain alcohol, or you could say rectified Everclear over in the US, and it's so pure that the catalytic reaction doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen as quickly. But when you get these tiny little impurities that are in there, let's say from the grape, all the way from the grape up to the rectified alcohol, they create the bridge, and they will jump, and it will help the sulfur principle jump over. And also for the crystals, it's not a pure crystal you're looking for. You need impurities in the crystal, which are usually metallic, and they create the bridge as well. So in all menstruum, there's the rectification, and we get towards the end, and there are still impurities in there, like from the wine spirit, the philosophical wine spirit from the acetate path. It's those impurities that have been pulled out with the philosophical acetone from the mineral that create the bridge. So impurities are very important in alchemy.
And can you give just a quick definition again of what exactly it means in terms of rectification? Like if you're to rectify, what would be the difference between something non-rectified and then something that is rectified?
It's quite simple, really. It's repeated distillation.
Okay, so the more distillations it goes through, the more rectified it becomes.
Yeah, and the subtler it becomes. Yeah, because even if you just keep pouring it back over itself and then redistilling, it's rectifying. It's becoming more and more subtle, more and more volatile, we could say.
Okay. And then, so as for dry menstruums, you mentioned antimony.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit on what exactly antimony is?
Antimony is a mineral that exists in the earth from stibnite. It's stibnite basically, and it's more of a metalloid as opposed to a metal, but it's extremely important in alchemy. I mean, for as they say, the dry path to actually create the stone, it's primordial. You can't make the stone without it, and we use that to purify gold. So it's a method because it's a ferocious. They call it the wolf. Yeah, and this is why in the old alchemical literature you'll see the pictures where it was all in code of a wolf eating the king.
Grey wolf, is that what it is?
The grey wolf, yeah. The king is obviously gold, and the wolf who's eating him is antimony. And then you'll probably see in the background of the picture, you'll see a fire with the wolf trotting away from the fire, which basically means that then the wolf is burnt off, leaving the purified gold.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah. It's that I love learning and observing the metallic work, and you know, guys like you and Raven, you guys post a lot about that, and it's just fascinating to me. And then I think you were doing something recently with was it Bismuth 83P or something like that? What
83.
exactly?
Well, that's its atomic number. So
Okay, cool. And so what can you discuss a little bit about like the consciousness of this metal and a
I mean, basically, I don't invent this. I'm following some work and research that was done from Robert Cox back in the day. Well, recently, I mean, in the 20th century, who put out a theory that the final production of the stone needed certain ingredients, impurities, and one of these impurities that helped create the stone was bismuth, which was the missing element. And his theory postulates that the stone was made from philosophical mercury and philosophical gold. And the ways of preparing these two ingredients was extremely important. It wasn't using yellow gold, it was using our gold, as the alchemists say, which was basically monoatomic or diatomic gold, which was reduced to its absolute ultimate, monoatomic. It doesn't get more basic than that. And then the philosophical mercury, how the purification of the mercury was extremely important. It was the doves of Diana. And he says the missing link is bismuth, which helps create the green and the green field of Venus that flows on top of the mercury, or the orange flowers when it gets too hot. So he was, and he's done the experiments, and this is me just trying to prove things, experience it myself.
And I've heard of...
just coming back to the bismuth idea is basically the philosophical principles of this story about why bismuth is involved is because it's actually the last stable element in the periodic table. After bismuth, things start going radioactive. So they say that bismuth, being the last stable element, is what we call the priest, as in the most elevated form of consciousness in the metallic realm. So so what happens for the alchemical marriage, where you'll have your gold, which is atomic number 80, I think, and then the mercury. So mercury, who's the queen, gold, who's the king. Once they are purified, then they can be married by the priest. And so the priest will actually purify the queen. It's a bit like a religious ceremony. He'll wash and he will purify the queen, and then for the marriage with the king. And so this is why Robert Cox's theory, I think, probably stands as something quite probable, because even just in the chain of elements, as we go up the elements towards radioactivity, bismuth is at the top. So it would seem logical that that bismuth is part of the equation. And so that's why at the moment I'm just working with bismuth to basically extract its sulfur principle as a first exercise. And then I've got quite a good stock of mercury as well. So we'll be going for that soon.
That's fascinating. All right, so you do something called the oil of egg. I've seen some things here and there about the oil of egg, and it's kind of something like I would never have really considered, but it seems to be pretty valuable and important in terms of an oil. So I'm kind of just wondering, like, what is it about oil of egg? And are there different kind of methods of obtaining the oil of egg, and what's your method for that?
Well, there are a couple of methods. I mean, basically, most of the what I'm doing is based on the research of a Polish alchemist who financed some studies in Japan on the oil of egg, and this is how we found out that the oil of egg is an extremely powerful antioxidant. It's a natural antibiotic, and also it's for topical use for the skin. The studies were done on burn victims, and it helped heal burns 4 times faster and didn't leave scarring. So for burn treatment, it's extremely useful. I mean, and why is that? Is because it's got the same lipid structure as human skin. So in fact, it's not like an oil that like the aloe vera, which comes from the outside, and you put it on as a carrier oil, because it's absorbed into the skin is aloe vera, but it is a foreign element. But the oil of egg, when you put it on your skin, because it has the same structure, the skin will actually consider it as part of itself, so it will absorb it much quicker and much more rapidly, because it feels it's part of itself. But the oil of egg, there are a few ways of extracting it. Basically, you need egg yolk. It's egg yolks that we dry out, and then there's 2 ways basically. Well, there are a few. The old style was that they would slowly roast the egg yolks in a pan until they started seeping oil out. But there are more efficient ways today. One is an acetone extraction, which is virtually instantaneous. You need to purify your acetone first, and the other is an alcohol extraction. But I'm actually making a video on it at the moment. The alcohol extraction, I would say, is more useful for internal works. They actually make toothpaste now with it as well, because if people with pyorrhea, which is bleeding gum syndrome, because it helps reduce scarring, it's extremely useful on toothpaste. And then the acetone we use more as the topical use. It's for acne, things like that. I mix it with a bit of manuka and a bit of tamanu, which are, manuka is, all the young kids today, they're using like tea tree oil on their spots, because it dries them out really quickly. And manuka, which I think it comes from New Zealand, it's 20 times stronger than tea tree. So I put a few drops of like 4% manuka in there, and then tamanu, which is good for scarring as well. And it's extremely, extremely useful for kids with spots. But the alcohol extraction or an acetone extraction, and then you filter those off, and you'll get the raw oil. The alcohol extraction you leave, because to purify that oil, you usually end up with an omelette instantly, and you ruin it. So that we'll leave. The acetone extraction, once the raw oil is made, we distill off the acetone, and then pour the hot raw oil into hot water, and gently stir it, and that will start bringing off more of any residual acetone. Don't want to stir it too fast, because again you'll probably get an omelette and just ruin all the work that you've done. And then once that oil is has been purified. Then you leave it. I leave mine for over a month, couple of months, and the natural sulfur will start crystallizing out. So you'll see these beautiful crystals forming in the lovely orange yellow oil, and then filter that, and then you end up with an extremely pure oil.
Wow. And does it matter what type of egg, like chicken egg, duck egg, ostrich egg? Is it pretty much
You'd need less ostrich eggs, I'm quite sure,
less ones?
but to make a decent quantity. The quantity you get actually is, I would say, around 1 milliliter per egg. So when you if you do it well, it's around 1 milliliter per egg, which is not too bad. But when you consider if you want 100 milliliters, you need 100 eggs. And so, but I would think, I've only tried it with chicken eggs, biological chicken eggs, obviously, natural free range eggs. But I would think duck eggs would be interesting because, or goose eggs would be interesting because they have more fat in them. So you probably get a better yield.
In terms of like producing something like a metallic oil, back to like the metallic work, I know that I think I've heard you say it's a pretty time-consuming process. In terms of like a duration, how long does it generally take to produce an oil of a metallic compound?
Well, if you want to produce an oil from a metal, for it to be properly purified, properly sweetened, and bioavailable and fit for human consumption, it takes, I would say, over a year. So it's not a process you can throw out in a month. The extraction, the catalyzing, doesn't take all that long, but the sweetening and the maturing of the oil takes a while. So I think patience is a virtue when it comes to producing a true metallic oil, for sure.
Wow. Great things take time.
Like children.
Indeed. You describe something called angel oil or the oil of tartar. I'm wondering what is the oil of tartar, and then kind of like what is its applications within the metallic work?
The oil of tartar per deliquium, or as we call it in France here, huile des anges, angel oil, which is quite an apt name. It's just potassium carbonate that has been deliquesced outside at night. So the reason we deliquesce it and we don't just add distilled water is because in the night air and the dew in the morning, when that comes, it's loaded with what we call the universal or secret fire, which is basically potassium nitrate, which is an extremely volatile and unstable salt, which I think they use in gunpowder. So that in the goes into the creates this oil, basically this liquid when these salts deliquesce, and then we store that, and we can use it in the vegetable realm for making the ENS extractions, or in the metallic and the mineral realm, where we use it to precipitate gold. Can use to precipitate gold and precipitate other metals, where that will pull them out of, let's say, a chloride state solution, that will precipitate them out, which is then, because the potassium carbonate is actually from the plant realm. When you actually make your salts you doing in plant alchemy, you basically end up, when you calcine your plant material, you end up with potassium carbonate. So using something from the vegetable realm to precipitate something from the mineral realm is jumping your metal already up a realm. You're making it more available. So you're taking it from the metallic realm into the vegetable realm. And then sometimes we drop it back into the metallic realm and then jump it back again. So it's a double jump of realm to get it used to being in the vegetable realm, and then it becomes more fit for human consumption, basically more bioavailable. It's all about realm jumping. I think alchemy is all about realm jumping, and it's how you jump back and forth between realms, and a lot of that's done with actually pH, which is, you know, when you're precipitating things out, you're taking something that's an acid solution, and then we're neutralizing, and this will precipitate out. Usually as a carbonate, and then we can extract that carbonate in another way.
Wow, I like that, the way you put it about jumping realms. That's pretty interesting.
Alchemy is all about realms and how you get from one to another, and what vehicle you use to get from one to another, and what impurity is in those vehicles.
Wow. So with the geobiology stuff, I've come across this idea that it's like there's like geological lines that basically like emanate out from within the earth, and they're kind of like static waves or sound in some sense, and kind of form like a fractal pattern or sort of like energetic grid matrix around the earth. Can you describe a bit about like this geometry, or like the frequency emanating out? Like I've heard it proposed that like at large scale, if you look at like the major nodes, from like it forms like an icosahedodecahedron or something, and I'm not sure if that's accurate, but as far as like the geometry is concerned, how do you see all that, and like how can we identify this? Is this what has to do with like ley lines and stuff like that? Is that correct?
No, don't confuse the lines with the geopathic lines.
Totally different thing.
Totally.
Okay.
Totally
So, like, say something like the Bermuda Triangle, how there's kind of like a known energetic effect or phenomenon that occurs within like certain areas on the Earth. Is that due to like what you would talk about with like geopathic stressors, or would you relate that to something kind of a different phenomena?
The Bermuda Triangle, I've not researched the Bermuda Triangle, but I think there's probably some electromagnetic disturbance, that's for sure, there. But the interesting thing about talk about geopathic stress and the grids that we know about. Basically, these grids, there's many of them. It's been proposed that they are related to each of the metals. So you will get like the Curry line. I think it's copper. I'll just check that. You've got the Hartmann line, which is related to nickel. You've got the Palm reso, which is related to copper. Then you've got the sacred global grid related to gold. Then you've got the Curry related to iron. What's interesting about these grids is that they're named after the people who discovered them. And it's quite interesting because the Hartmann grid was discovered by Dr. Hartmann, the Curry grid by Dr. Curry, the Weissman grid by Dr. Weissman, and they were relating it to human health. And this is why there's a lot of interest in geopathic stress. But coming back to your question, the grids are axed north-south, east-west, so longitudinally and latitudinally, and there are also grids which are at 45 degrees to those, which are the diagonal grids. So these grids are, as you say, fractal. That means that, let's say, for the Hartmann grid, which is a coefficient of 5. So for every 5 lines of Hartmann, which are every 2 meters 50 or 2 meters 80 north, south, east, west. So you get it's basically a little box that you get. So they're everywhere if they're every 2 meters 50. So they alternate in polarity. So positive, negative, positive, negative. Also, so they're fractal. So for every 5th Hartmann line, there is a level 2 Hartmann. So that's twice as strong. And then for every 5 level 2s, there is a level 3. And so they're fractal like that. So there are certain places where they are extremely large. So, and this creates these disturbances, geopathic stress. The fact is that the lines also, they are not electromagnetic, which a lot of people think, they're just it's electromagnetic disturbance. But the fact is that there's been some tests done that even within a Faraday cage, these grids are detectable. So this is why this promoted the standing wave theory as well, where it's a static wave of sound, and they can be checked with. There's a very famous Swiss geobiologist, Stefan Cardinal, who uses what he called the sono test, which is like a very subtle noise detector to actually detect these things. So, and the reason that they're very interesting, these grid lines, is because they cross, and at the crossing points they can be extremely nefast. Also, they're 3-dimensional, so they're not just flat on the Earth. Let's say the Hartmann lines, which are, let's say, every 2 meters 50. They change. It's 2 meters 20, 2 meters 80, north, south, east, west. But they're not just horizontal; they're vertical as well. So you'll get a cube of that exists, and at the crossing points of these corners of the cube, you will get what we can call a 3D point, which are, if it's the negative polarities that are crossing, they become extremely dangerous. I mean, they've been related to cancer for years. They're not necessarily the cause of cancer, but they can precipitate and declench cancer. I mean, one of the great studies that was done in Bavaria in 1929, when Gustav von Pohl, who was a dowser, he went into a village called Wilsberg, I think it was, and they mapped out, him and his team, they mapped out all the geopathic stress of the grid lines, underground water sources, underground water currents as well, and they mapped them out onto the village. Okay, and then they put these over the plan of the village, and then they analyzed all the cancer deaths in that village over the years and years preceding. And 100% of all cancer deaths had been over geopathic stress. And he actually gave it a level of 1 to 16. And
Wow.
of how dangerous these lines were on this scale. And anything over 9 had a cancer death on it. And it was irrefutable evidence. And then they went to another village and did the same, and it was the same results. And then a few years later, back in Wilsberg, all the other cancer deaths that had occurred recently were also on there. And they tried to disprove his theory. I mean, the scientists tried to disprove his theory, and nobody could. And so this is what created the link of the inextricable link between geopathic stress and cancer, is because these waves, basically on these crossing points, there is like a laser of energy that's coming up through the earth. I mean, I've measured hundreds of houses, thousands probably, and even with people with cancer and even after cancer death. And I can go into or any good geobiologist can go into a room, onto let's say a bed, and measure and tell you exactly where the cancer was or is, because it's that accurate. And so where you sleep is extremely important. If you sleep, because what happens at night, your body's recovering. It's, kids are growing during the night. Your body's meant to be resting. And so if you're on geopathic stress, it's causing you not to sleep properly, and also you'll get this little laser. And the fact is, cancer is fairly complicated, but it's quite simple. I mean, our body produces cancer cells every day, but our killer T cells, which is our immune system, our white cells, they actually gobble them up all the time, so there's no problem. But when your immune system is actually lowered or under attack, then these cancer cells can start staying in the body as opposed to being destroyed. And what happens is that if you're sleeping in your bed at night and you've got a geopathic stress point under your bed, and it's coming up through the same part of your body most of the night, even though you move around, but most of the night it's on the same part of your body. Basically, a cancer cell needs 7 times more energy to actually develop. So this is why you talk about cutting out sugar and things like that. But you can imagine you're on these cancer cells are floating around in your body, and suddenly they are all saying to themselves, hey guys, there's a free buffet over here. Let's go. And so they'll all accumulate around this point of energy coming up through and feed off it, basically. And that's why cancer will develop in a certain part of your body and not elsewhere. And there's been many cases of, that's what we call cancer houses, where the dad, let's say, will die of prostate cancer, and the kids inherit the house, and then they go in the same bedroom, and bang, the wife will die of cancer of the uterus, or he'll die of something, because it's and the same cancer, where they'll say, oh, that's hereditary. Is that cancer because it's the same family? Not necessarily. It can be just due to geopathic stress. And it's not just cancer. I mean, let's say attention deficit disorder with kids. I mean, there's been studies done where I think it was 700 kids. I've got it written here. That the kids who had attention problems or were hyperactive at school were behaving badly. They were either sitting in school on geopathic stress, or at home they were sleeping on geopathic stress. So, I mean, the studies are innumerable, but it's still not accepted in modern medicine. I mean, apart from places like Austria. I mean, I'm a consultant geobiologist for a naturopathic clinic in Austria, and in Austria and southern Germany, if you go to the doctor and you're diagnosed with cancer, the doctor will say, send a geobiologist around to your house, because the chances of actually healing from cancer, even if you just move out of the zone that's affecting you, is incredible. There was I think it was the wife of the president of Germany back in 1985. She was Veronica Carstens, who was the wife of the president Karl Carstens, and she published a study of instant healing of terminal cancer in over 700 patients. And this is the wife of the president who did this study, and it's just moving them away from geopathic stress. And these people 700 people just moved away from geopathic stress and healed themselves, because basically the body heals itself. That's what it's designed to do.
Wow, that's insane. Now I'm curious how, in terms of like elevation, if you're living on a geopathic stress crossing line and you're in, say, a 2-story or a 3-story building, how high elevated does the energy go? Has that been measured?
It goes high. I mean, even at the top of a skyscraper in Dubai, it is. But the fact is that they deviate slightly. So the actual point on the ground where they come out will not correspond. It will be maybe the higher you go, let's say 30 stories, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 meters slightly differently. But they actually go very high. So.
Wow. Okay. And then
you can't escape.
What was that?
You can't escape them. You can avoid them, but
you can't escape them. So, I've heard of something now with these crossing lines. Is this related to something called, I think it was called the angles of sorrow? I've heard a term in the feng shui kind of industry. They talk about angles of sorrow. They're kind of like right angles that just energetically they create kind of they stop the flow of energy, and with that flow being stopped, those certain areas, like say if it's in a house, it would attract a lot of bugs or something, and it would just be like a kind of like a stagnating type energy blockage point or something like that. Is that kind of related, or is that? It
is related. What you're talking about is, as we say in French, onde de forme, or a form wave, okay, which would be, let's say, an angle, a pointy angle. This is why when they say, in Feng Shui, I'm not an expert in Feng Shui, but pointy angles, sharp things are not very Feng Shui, they say, because they actually disrupt, let's say, the flow of qi. The relationship between Feng Shui and geobiology is interesting, because back in China, back in the day in China, they talked about the dragon lines, okay, and these were the qi flowing lines, okay, which usually came out of things like volcanoes, high mountain peaks. The higher the peak, the better. And it's the natural energy of the earth that's flowing out from certain points. And sometimes they will jump onto, let's say, a grid line, because it's a direction of flow for them. But these dragon lines, which are totally natural, okay, this energy basically flows along flows through the earth, and you're talking about the lines of these points of sorrow. Basically, these sine waves, basically form waves, are created, which will actually block this natural flow of energy, and so that's why these things are considered negative.
Wow, okay. And then, so are these lines, are they primarily like in water, like underground rivers, or I think you said like a lot of it has to do with like mineral loads, which project the energy to the surface, kind of like loads like being like deposits of metalliferous ore that kind of fills or is embedded in like a fissure or like a rock formation or like a vein of an ore that's kind of like deposited or embedded between layers of rock. Is this are these kind of the things that are creating these energies to emanate up? Or overall within your research, what are some of the commonalities or patterns that you can observe and detect when you're studying these different geopathic stressors in terms of like the geology?
Well, the certain networks, let's say the Hartmann, the Curry, the Weissman, the Piri, etc., which are related to the or have been associated with the metallic composition of the Earth's crust, which create these things. I don't think it's linked to a particular deposit here or there. They can be concentrated maybe around there. I mean, it's like the Hartmann grid network is, we call it an electric network because round, let's say, your electric box in your house or whatever, they will squash and they will become more concentrated around there. The Curry grid is they say a magnetic grid, and so it will concentrate around large metallic objects like a big metal fireplace or a pile of metal during building work when they've got all the steel work waiting there. They concentrate around those, and this is why things like metallic structure for building work can be quite disadvantageous on a health level, because you will get all the Curry lines jumping in to link up with this metallic grid that you've artificially made. So you can get concentrations of things that are quite negative around that kind of thing. But to actually, I don't do research into these lines. I just really detect them. Basically to aid in to helping human health. That's sure.
In terms of detecting them, is this something that you'd use like a dowsing rod for, or what kind of instruments or technology would you use to detect these lines or these stressors? Basically, it's a form of dowsing. You can feel them with your hand as well. It's just, but the easiest is using a dowsing rod, or I use a Lecker antenna, which was created by Dr. Ernst Lecker in the beginning of the 19th century, I think, which is basically a very technical dowsing rod with frequencies on it that we can actually alter the frequency. Because if you just use a dowsing rod, you use what we call the mental convention, that mental thought, I'm looking for water, and you're tuning yourself in to look for water. And it is extremely tiring to do that. But with a Lecker antenna, you can just put your little cursor on this Lecker antenna to the frequency of water, running water. And then you can even think about anything. You can think about the match that you're going to watch tonight and whatever. Don't have to even think, and it will still detect. It's you that's the aerial. It's all dowsing rods or dowsing equipment is just an amplifier of what your own body is actually picking up on. So that's why you can
check it with your hand, or you can use an amplifier, which is a dowsing device. And there are certain electronic devices, a geomagnomet, but these are extremely expensive things.
And then in terms of your ability sensually to be able to detect these, say if you had a cup of coffee or something very stimulating, would that affect your ability to detect these stressors, or what do you think about that?
No, I mean, it's I like to disassociate this kind of attitude where, oh, you've got to be pure and you not drink alcohol, not drink coffee, and you will open up your channels and feel these things better. The fact is, you just got to be pragmatic at the end of the day. I mean, I do this as a job, so you know, I don't have the most amazing healthy lifestyle, but I look after myself. But no, I don't think using a Lecker antenna, it doesn't really matter. I mean, you don't want to be hungover or anything, because geobiological work is extremely tiring. I mean, you need to drink lots of liquid, but you spend a day mapping out a site for someone to do a build on, or something like that. Because when you're connecting to these energies, it's coming through you. This is why you can detect them, and so you're spending a lot of time all day actually on these things, and so it does tire you out. I mean, the fact is, the damage that these grids do to you, it's not instantaneous. It's a long-term thing. It's like the Chinese water torture, drip, 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 and it's staying on them a long time. This is why the most important room to have checked is your bedroom or your office, where you sit all day, every day. I think it was Dr. Hartman who did the study where how it can actually be extremely quick. And it was in Germany again. There was an operating theatre in a hospital, and on either side of this operating theatre there were the reanimation rooms. When people came out the operating theatre, they went into one room or the other to be looked after, so they could clean the block for the next patient. And on either side of this operating room, in one room there was 200% more death than there was in the other room. And thinking, well, this is really bizarre. Why is this room ever more people are dying? And he checked it out, and there was an extremely noxious geopathic stress point under the bed of the reanimation room there. And the fact is, people having serious surgery under anaesthetic, the body was in a state of trauma, and this geopathic stress was just enough to tip them over the edge. So yes, it can have not immediate effect, but in that situation, yeah, it could.
Wow. And are these considered, or are they related to what's called Telerik currents, or is that a different kind of form of?
Telerik currents are what we call let's say the dragon lines. It's the natural chi flow. The Telerik current is the natural chi flow of the Earth. It's not related to the grid lines. It's a natural phenomenon. It's the Earth's etheric field, or the Earth's etheric network of, let's say, we have veins in our body. It's the Earth's vein system of energy transfer. Because I mean, it's polarity. It's going. It's why does wind exist? It's high pressure, low pressure, and it's that bridge that draws the air, and the Earth has its own circulation.
So theoretically, if you were to spend quite a bit of time on a geopathic stressor with a negative polarity, and then you might take on some ailments, would you want to then maybe go to a location with a positive polarity to help reverse that stress? Does it work like that, or is it a little bit different?
Your body's designed to heal itself. That's what it does. It's like when you cut yourself, as long as you keep it clean, you don't have to do anything, and it just rebuilds itself. The body it's our vehicle here on Earth, and it looks after itself. So you don't even have to look for a positive environment, as long as you get off the negative environment. I mean, there are lines that are extremely positive. It's like there's the sacred grid line. I think it's the gold one. And in all churches, there's a crossing of this sacred line, usually just behind the altar where the priest stands, and to actually channel this energy. I mean, virtually all cathedrals and sacred sites are built on crossings of or star points of several of these grid networks, and with the Telerik currents coming through as well. And using these stones, it's like earth acupuncture, we call it. These stones will then put on these sites, will push away the negative polarity ones, and create what we call sacred spaces. I mean, geobiology, there's other phenomena in geobiology which are extremely interesting, which are the cosmotelluric chimneys and the vortexes. And they are natural phenomena that the cosmotelluric chimneys are amazing. They actually mobile phenomena, etheric phenomena that create the breathing cycles of the Earth. To analyze them, they can be up to 400 meters high, 200 meters below the ground. They're like a big flower, basically. And you can actually see the presence of them, because it'll be like in the grass sometimes. I've got some pictures on one of our websites, which, they're just fantastic things, where you'll see natural circles like fairy rings of mushrooms is the proof of the presence of a cosmotelluric chimney. The fairy rings, certain vegetation growing in circles is usually the presence of these things. And they actually have a breathing cycle where they will be pulling down energy from the upper atmosphere, okay, which is, and it's usually like they'll inhale, which is about a 3-minute inhalation. Then it'll stop for about 45 seconds, sometimes a minute, and then they will exhale for 3 minutes, and then it will stop for 45 seconds, a minute. And so they'll breathe, they're breathing in and out, and they're cleansing the etheric field of the Earth. And they have arms as well that can come out. All the arms, though, you can have a positive chimney or a negative chimney polarity, but the arms are always negative, and they attract negative etheric energy, basically psychic energy as well. So they're basically cleaning the Earth. And they're absolutely fascinating, these chimneys. And then the vortexes, which are positive, and they link two areas, 2 points together via 2 spirals and a linking tube, which they can actually transfer energy from one place to another. And these are actually used in sacred architecture. The churches, these churches and cathedrals, even small churches, they're built with these things integrated into them, because these things can actually be moved by intention. To go into a church, let's say what we call the seuil of discharge, or the discharge threshold, where you will walk to a church, towards a church, and then as you step over the threshold, there'll be a drop in your energy. And that's because they'll have got probably a cosmotelluric chimney negative on the door threshold, or a 3D Hartmann crossing to completely negative. So what it's actually used to do is so you drop your energy, and then there'll be the certain circuits that you do in a church or a cathedral, where you will go from one area or one little chapel to another in the church, and basically it will be charging you up again, but with specific energy, until you then become and so you'll probably get in churches 1, 2, 3 cosmotelic chimneys. There'll be a vortex, there'll be a crossing of the sacred point. The sacred architecture, I mean, the people who built these things were not stupid, and they had an amazing knowledge of how energy works, and these things that exist in the natural environment that they used. I mean, you go to sacred sites, with standing stones, or sometimes in nature, and there'll be these energetic circuits that you can go on. I mean, it's like in this cathedral in Chartres in France. There's the famous labyrinth there that's on the floor, and I'm getting onto sacred architecture now, which is another fascinating subject. But you will walk in there to the maze. At the beginning of the maze, there is a discharge point, so you'll be lowered. And then as you walk around the maze, you'll be going up and up and up and up and up. And if you do it properly, when you get to the middle, it's just explosive energy, positive energy. And so it's using the Earth's energy to actually create a spiritual evolution, even if it's on a short term, and everything's linked. I mean, cathedrals,
It blows my mind.
I mean, the cathedrals are just gobsmacking. These things are built in perfect proportion, and the fact is that you will get the nef, which is like the highest point, and then there'll be the altar that's on the floor, and then it's the highest point of the cathedral is above that. And why did they build crypts when they didn't even? They put bodies in there, but the crypts are nothing to do with body storage. Basically, it's all to do with the endomilieu d'une forme, which is the wave, the middle wave of the form. So you'll get probably, let's say, 2/3 of the height. It's millimeter fucking perfect. 2/3 of the height will be up at the top of the cathedral. You'll come down onto the floor where the hotel is, where there will be probably a star point, which is a lot of earth energy lines crossing, which is usually extremely negative. Okay. But then you'll have the crypt underneath, which is about 1/3 the depth of the height of the cathedral. And so what that actually does, it cancels out, because it's in the perfect place. So you'll get all the negative energy underneath, the positive energy on top, and then it cancels out. So when you're actually standing at the altar, you will be on a star point that is being transformed absolutely, totally positively. And
Wow.
it is done deliberately.
Oh my gosh. That's fascinating.
It is, I mean, we've lost so much of this kind of knowledge.
It's like architectural transmutation.
It is. And it exists in nature, but the cathedral builders, they knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, when coming back to alchemy a bit, I mean, which is totally gobsmacking, is that a lot of these cathedrals, the stained glass in these cathedrals, I mean, these, like the rosary window in the church, they're just gobsmacking pieces of art. And how did they make all this colored glass? And the fact is, coming back to antimony, antimony, as we say, is a glass maker. It's when you melt antimony, you can make glass. You can make glass of antimony, okay, which is usually a pale, reddy sort of color. But the Templars, who financed a lot of these cathedrals and built a lot of them, they had the knowledge of making beautiful glass, which was like a red glass and a purple glass. And how did they do that? They were fucking using monoatomic and diatomic gold to deliberately make colored glass with antimony. And they were dissolving monoatomic and diatomic gold. And back in the day, you can do it with an annealing furnace today, but to make this kind of gold, which is used in creating this philosopher's stone, is extremely technical. And they were using the dry method to do it, which is dissolving gold, metallic gold in antimony, okay? Because, as we say, the grey wolf eats up gold. So that would eat up the gold. Then what they'd do, they would grind that up, that ore that they'd made of the gold and the antimony, and they would then dissolve it in mercury. Okay? And they dissolve this in mercury, and the mercury would do what? The mercury would join in there, and then they grind that up, and it would eat off the antimony, okay, and leave the purified gold. So you get the gold in the mercury, liquid mercury, and then they would distill off the mercury, okay, and that would leave gold in the bottom of the retort. But in that mercury that they've distilled off is the volatile parts of the gold, and that would float on the surface as a powder, and it would be monoatomic or diatomic gold. And these Knights Templars would collect this, and they would then use it to create glass of the most sublime color that people don't go, how the fuck did these guys do that back in the 13th century or even before? And it's because these guys had the knowledge with the dry path to create monoatomic and diatomic gold to make specific colored glass.
Wow.
It is, it is just mind-boggling what these guys knew.
And I'm assuming with the organs and a lot of these old cathedrals, that probably plays a huge part into channeling that energy in.
Well, you've interviewed Eric Dollard, haven't you?
Yes.
I mean, that is an amazing story that he tells about sitting right on the correct point with the whole harmonics and just getting a musical orgasm. I mean, it's just, and the fact is, you're in these cathedrals which are created in perfect resonance with geopathic earth lines. It's just mind-boggling, I find.
And you mentioned star points, and it made me think, I don't know if you've seen some of these aerial pictures, or I mean maybe even in person, of what's called star fortresses. There's a lot of sites all around the world where there are these interesting star forts. Have you heard of these, or have you seen any of these? And do you think that there's any connection?
No, I don't know about that, but I can imagine what they are.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
There'll be these energetic nodes that are there. But if you coming back to ley lines, because you talked about ley lines earlier, and you were saying, are they similar? The fact is, up to now, we've been talking about natural phenomena like the dragon lines, the Telerik currents, underground water, underground rock fissures, and the geopathic fractal lines of the Rezo, the Curry and the Hartman, etc. Ley lines. Ley lines are totally man-made. They are not natural. And this is why you get, let's say in England, in the south of England, you get the Michael line, or, St. Michael line, and there's one in France and stuff. And on this line, you'll find all these churches that are called the Church of St. Michael, or the Church of Mary. And they exist all over the world, okay, these things. And basically, these lines link certain points specific, and they've existed since like thousands of years before Jesus Christ. They've been created, let's say, with operative magic, where they are, and some of them will take the line of some geopathic stress line, let's say, or an earth current line, a Telerik current line. But these they were actually created for the transfer of, let's say, spiritual information from an egregor, where they could people didn't have to unite in one place to actually worship a cult. You would get one place in a church there, and then the other people in the church at the other end of the line, and it works a bit like a vortex. The other end of
like an old school way of communicating information across long distances or something.
Yep, it's exactly that. I mean, as I say, Stefan Cardinaux, he actually analysed and they on some of these lines, and they were sending Morse signals, and they could be picked up way down the line.
Wow.
So yeah, they're basically communication lines for transmitting intensive energy.
Wow, that's fascinating.
So yeah, ley lines are totally man-made, and they are still used today.
And so with these, like here in America, where we have all these power lines, would these be following along these man-made ley lines, or do you think that they're separate constructions? Sometimes they'll go across vast distances in the forest or something like that. I don't know. Maybe a while ago in the beginnings they were tuned into the lines somehow. I wonder. But I wanted to.
I don't know, electricity lines you're talking about.
Yeah. They have the big poles, and then they have the lines like that. I'm not sure.
I wouldn't know. I think electricity grids are probably just the shortest distance and the straightest line.
That makes sense. So in terms of these spiral vortexes, it made me wonder. My sister has this tree in her yard. It's a big tree, and the trunk of it kind of like spirals as it goes up. Would that indicate that there's some kind of energetic vortex that? Yeah.
For sure. Could be a chimney, a cosmotelluric chimney, but nature does avoid a lot of these things. Like, let's say when you see trees leaning over, a line of trees leaning over, it's because they are avoiding an underground water source, for sure. Because underground water sources, it's the currents, underground water currents. It's the water flowing along the rocks with the minerals in the rocks that creates friction, and that creates like a pico current. This is why underground water is electromagnetic, extremely electromagnetic, and it's these currents that are coming up on the banks of these underground water streams, and trees and plants will lean away from that, or you'll sometimes see a tree with a huge scar at the bottom of it as it's leaning away. It looks like a door or whatever, with the scarring on the tree, and that's the gamma radiation coming up as well, that's causing the damage to the tree. And so, I mean, to go do a geobiological analysis of a house, first thing I'll do when I arrive is look at nature and see, because you'll get like a hedge, and there'll be like one tree that's smaller or a bit brown, and you think, oh, there's something coming through there, or there'll be a crack in the house, and we've had that filled in 5 times, and it's just keeps coming back. Well, obviously, it's so you can see all these things. You can see all these things around you, and but yeah, underground water currents. Yeah, and nature doesn't. Plants don't like that. So.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And then I wanted to go back to the cathedral builders and their knowledge. I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about some of the window. I think it was either the carvings in the cement or the the shapes in the windows being related to geometry, certain cymatic geometries, and they were encoding. It was alleged that they were encoding these cymatic geometric shapes into the cathedrals to kind of preserve the knowledge in some way. And I think there was some investigators or researchers that are trying to kind of get a hold of these different geometric patterns, like within the cement or the windows or something, and then use them to project sounds, because those certain frequencies are potentially beneficial for healing in some fashion. I think that was what they were alluding to. So I found that really interesting too, with the cathedrals, and I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you with the cathedrals, like these stained glass windows and stuff, and I mean the colors of these things, and all the light shining through, and imagine all these colors in a certain order, in a certain image that have been done. It's these frequencies that are coming in, because everything's just frequency and this vibration. So these things are not just decoration, I'm quite sure.
Yeah, definitely. And so you had mentioned earlier, well, actually, before I get to this question, I want to ask you one more question. Like with the lines, say like with the grid of like the gold or lines related to that, which is kind of like a sacred grid or whatever. Is this something that's been mapped, and is there the documented maps of these different lines related to different metals? I think you'd mentioned, I'm not sure how many, but they were named after each person that had discovered them. But are there resources somewhere that people can look at these different maps and areas where these occur on the Earth?
They occur everywhere. So, I mean, as I say, the Hartmann is maybe 2 meters 50, 2 meters 80, north, south, east, west. The Curry is every 8 meters 50. One of the Rondiagonal is every 11 to 15. So, I mean, they're absolutely everywhere, are these things. So there's no real point in mapping them, because as well, they actually change. They're not completely stuck. There's been certain analysis done that on the Hartmann grid, because it's more of an they say it's an electromagnetic grid, even though it isn't. It just likes electricity. During before an earthquake, they increase in size to these things. They actually swell up. And this is why people think, oh, well, how do, there's going to be a volcanic eruption, or there's the big earthquake. They've noticed large animal displacement. It's like, wow, and the birds all fly away, and everything goes quiet. And it's like, wow, the animals can feel it. How can these animals feel it? And I think it's because they're very in touch with these networks, because they're living in nature all the time. Is that when these networks expand, they go, oof, let's get out of here, because they know something's going to happen. And where these things are expanding, and in the direction that they're expanding, is it the northeast? Is it the north-south line? Is it the east-west line? They know which direction to go to these animals, because they're very sensitive to it. And so, yeah, it's been analysed that they actually swell up, and even during the day and during the night and the full moon. The other energies that influence all these grids, as I say, they will swell up during the day, and then they will reduce at night, or they will reduce during the day and swell up at night, and especially at sunrise and sunset. I mean, there's been a lot of research that's been done on these grids, and they actually move. So to actually map them out, I mean, and they're absolutely everywhere, apart from over the ocean, under the ocean, because the salt the amount of salt in the salt water blocks them. So on a boat, you don't get geopathic stress.
Oh, interesting. Okay, and then so say you live in an area that you have some of this geopathic stress on an open piece of land. Are there ways to construct or lay rocks or create patterns of using, say you get a bunch of boulders and arrange them in a certain pattern or something on the land? Are there ways of doing something like that that would help deter or push out or eliminate some of these stressors?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's called earth acupuncture, and that's the old way of actually negating the effect of these lines.
Wow.
But for construction, yeah, it's the fact is that the Hartman lines and stuff, they're so close together, and the Curry lines is that they're so close together, so you can't really avoid them. But you can, things, especially for construction, you want to get a geobiologist to come in and make sure you're not building over an underground water current or a fissure, a fissure in the earth, because these things they are very negative. So, and they exacerbate the problems. So you'll get an underground water current, and then if you get a Hartman crossing or a 3D Hartman crossing over that underground water current, it's not just the two negatives that are added together; they actually multiply themselves into even more negative. So it's just common sense. I mean, this is why what the American Indians used to do, or whatever. I mean, they put the animals, the horses, let them, and where the horses were, they knew, because certain animals like the negative effect and certain animals don't. I mean, things like horses, pigs, humans, we avoid naturally geopathic stress. Things like ants, they love it. So if you go out and you see an anthill, I guarantee you will be on a Hartman crossing. I mean, things like bees, beekeepers have known this for ages as well, is that if you actually, during summer months, if you move your hive onto a Hartman crossing, let's say a positive polarity Hartman crossing, it excites the bees and they will produce way more honey. And then at the end of the season, you move it off so they can rest. It's been known forever. I mean, we're not discovering much. We're just rediscovering lost information.
That's interesting.
So building, you can avoid it. Yeah, you just avoid the more negative things, and then you construct so you can place your bed between a lot of these places. It's not difficult.
And would something like an underground cavern, would that be a negative? Negative thing as well? Okay.
Yeah,
so
underground cavern.
Earlier you mentioned you're doing work with crystals, and I'm just absolutely fascinated with crystals and just the entire process of crystallization in general. And so I was just wondering if you had kind of any interesting, like, and speaking with I think it was Tom Joseph Brown, one of my interviews, he's a former director of what was called Borderland Laboratories, worked with Eric Dollard. He was shedding light on these studies that demonstrated things like the direct correlations between blood coagulations and the formation of colloidal solutions, and how it kind of corresponds with like solar geomagnetic activity and the effects like the March equinox and the Earth's relationship with the galactic center. And then there's like Lily Kalisko's work with things like gold chloride and silver nitrate and the crystallizations of these solutions in relation to different astronomical like alignments. And I'm just wondering, with your work with crystals, like any kind of interesting discoveries that you've made, or kind of like just any insights in general with crystal work, because I'm just fascinated with crystals.
Well, talking about Eric Dollard, so that's way over my pay grade, is that? But I mean, crystals are basically concentrations of information, ordered information. I mean, here in this Chamonix Valley, there's crystal hunters that climb up into the mountains and dig out these beautiful crystals. I mean, we use quartz a lot. It's used in watches, and it's used to carry information and store information. So getting crystals from the earth and then making them bioavailable. I mean, this is what I love about them, is that everyone loves it. I find it even more fascinating than the metallic realm, because the metals, we've got the 7 basic metals that are related to the planets, and there's all this work that we can do on them. And there are fringe metals that people are working with, like bismuth and stuff like that, rhodium and all these other rare earth metals. But the crystals and the stones is, I mean, you walk into any New Age shop and it's full of crystals and stones. And there's one for everybody. There's a color for everybody. And, oh, I've got my birthstones. And so people can relate to these things a lot. And to be able to render these things bioavailable is fascinating. I mean, people will wear a crystal around the neck, or they will leave it in some water overnight and then drink the water in the morning. And it's why not? It's all viable. But to actually extract the sulfur principle from a crystal and get its soul, and then to be able to ingest that soul is, I think it's spectacular. I mean, some of the work that I've been doing, some of the feedback I've been getting from some of the product that I've made is just mind-blowing of information. To give you an example, a friend of mine who was working for one of the hydroelectric dams here, they go up in helicopters all the time to clean filters of water sources and stuff like that. He was up on the Argentière Glacier, and they were going under the glacier to clean out one of these filters. And there's these crystals that were there. And he picks them up for me. They were just, nothing spectacular at all, just crystals with impurities in, which are very important. And he gave me them and said, work with those, Roger. Tell me what you think. And so I worked them. And I live in a place in the Chamonix Valley called Val Orsine. Val for valley, Ours for bears, and Seine. Okay. Val Orsine, the Valley of the Bears. Okay. So I get this crystal from the high mountains, and I prepare it and extract it here in the Valley of the Bears. Okay, and it's just to give you an idea of how information and crystals storing information. So I extract the sulfur principle of this crystal, and then I'm a bioenergetician. I treat people with bioresonance and stuff, and I make a lot of the products that I use. And I sent this product down to a friend of mine who's also a bioenergetician. And I said, here's one for your little kit, and here's some that you can take. And he lives in Avignon, which is 5 hours drive away, and in the south. And he gave some to his father-in-law. He said, try this. And his father-in-law took a few drops and stuff like that. And he came back the next morning and he goes, Ben, what the fuck did you give me? He said, I had the most bizarre dream last night. He said, I dreamt of this enormous crystal mountain, and these 2 big bears came up and they started licking it. And I thought, now that's interesting. You've no idea how it was made, where it came from, or whatever. And he dreamt of a crystal mountain with 2 bears licking it. Yeah. I mean, these crystals, they store all this information. You take a crystal that's probably been there for millions of years, getting all the information from around here, and then it's prepared in the Valley of the Bears. So it's taken on this information as it's giving up its soul. It's absorbed the information of this valley. I mean, there's not been bears here for centuries, but I thought it was really quite amusing, for sure. So I think the crystal work is taking information, and like another crystal I've been working on, which is apatite, which is a crystalline rock structure, a phosphorus crystalline rock structure, which makes these beautiful blue stones. And a friend of mine in a mineral shop here in Shamshi said, "Oh, try these," because they're apparently a very spiritual stone, because apatite actually exists as a crystalline structure within the human body. The enamel of your teeth has it in it. In your bones, there is apatite as well. But the most fascinating thing about apatite, which makes it very popular, is the fact that it is the only crystalline structure that exists within the pineal gland, which, as Socrates said, is the seat of the soul. So this is why it's extremely popular. So I spent months trying different menstrua, the radical vegetable alkahest, the alcohols, vinegar, this, that, and the other, and it eventually came down to the Glauber's glass method, which was suggested to me by John Reed. And this essential oil, basically, that was catalyzed from this apatite, I've been giving and selling quite a bit, actually, but gave it to test to a few people. And the feedback has been amazing as well with that. People have said that it's caused underlying old emotional blockages to come to the surface and then just dissipate after a day or two. So it's a form of cleaning. So, and I think we're only just at the start of developing and going into these matrices of nature and untapping the potential. And I think it's very interesting medicinally and spiritually. And I think this is why alchemy is. I think it's coming back again for sure. I mean, it has its ups and downs in history. As I said, as you've probably been reading, there's been quite a bit of development recently. In the community with my dear friend and genius Daniel.
Which, get into that with him on our next recording.
No, you do. I'll leave it for you and him. But I mean, I've been privileged to be in a front seat and working on it with him, and it is just fucking gobsmacking. So it's coming back for sure. And as I say, I think the mineral and the crystal work is an avenue that's not really been pursued too much with either the plants or the metals. But I think the crystals is going to open up a whole new paradigm.
I think so too. It's fascinating.
But once you understand it and you look at it with fresh eyes, suddenly other things will jump off the page, other words will come out, and things will start becoming evident. So, it's not to lose faith, just do the lab work, because then you see it for yourself, and that opens gates. So, don't be scared, just do some experiments, because it's good fun, and you don't have to blow yourself up or poison yourself. Do it in the plant realm first, I really advise, and you won't go far wrong.
Beautiful. Well, I'm definitely a huge fan of the videos that you're starting to put out there, and I'm grateful and appreciative of it too, because the audio and the video for me and my learning style, it just accelerates it more than reading, which reading is important too. But yeah, I definitely appreciate that kind of stuff. So
it's like being there. It's like being there and doing it.
Yeah.
So, and there's, as they say, the lantern of experience illuminates the road of he who carries it. And if you come into a video, this is why doing a video is good, because you're coming along this journey with me or whomever might make a video. You're coming along, and so you're actually experiencing it as well. You're not just reading about it. And I think that's very important. It's visual, it's auditive, and there's the whole atmosphere going on. So, and hopefully it'll encourage people to do the alchemical work, because it's not just being a lab nerd. it's a spiritual journey.
Absolutely. Well, once again, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate the work you're doing, and thank you for doing this interview and taking the time. So can you just spell your website out real quick for people? That way they can visit it if they're interested.
Or my Instagram account, yes, it's all chaotic, which is chaotic water, which is the primordial waters of creation. It's EAUX, and then chaotic, CHAOTIQUES. Spelled.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you again, and have a good.
The pleasure was all mine.